Hello and welcome to this Tuesday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Donald Trump's testimony turns heated in New York civil fraud trial, as well as that the Rafah crossing in Egypt and Gaza does reopen or is to reopen as pressure builds on Israel and Hamas to pause fighting. We've got lots to talk about on the charts also, with lots happening on the economic calendar as well. We'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around to see that. Before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. And the first article to talk about, though, of course, is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump played down the importance of the financial statements at the centre of the civil fraud lawsuit, and this comes as he began, a tumultuous turn on the witness stand that provoked several rebukes from the judge and turned a New York courtroom into a rambunctious political theatre, to quote the Financial Times, with the judge threatening to remove the former president, saying to his attorney, I beseech you to control him. If you can, if you can't, I will. So basically, threatening to kick out Trump from the courtroom, with Trump's lawyer responding by saying the court should grant former president of the US a little latitude to explain himself. Now, this isn't the first time we've really spoken about Trump standing on trial. We've covered it a few times now in a few market morning briefings, with, one of the first times we covered it talking about more so, the issues in relation to his sons, which did take over his business after he did go into his period of presidency. And there were great issues around the way that he valued his own assets, or at least, his accountants valued his assets when he approached lenders, banks, corporate institutions for loans to use in his business. He did pay off all those loans. However, it has now come to court the issues of his overvaluations of his own assets, with some cases of his real estate him inflating the value of those real estate properties 3x and above. And this is really what's created this civil fraud trial, whereby the judge is looking to see now whether Trump will pay, in the millions of fines, or even, his entire corporate family, and, his ability to run a business within New York may be halted and removed and stripped from him, which obviously would have a massive detriment to the legacy of Trump in relation to his business kind of power, and his business legacy in relations to that. Now, Trump during this trial did shake his head and declared, this is a very unfair trial. I hope the public is watching. And Trump's used this very audience focused rhetoric a lot, not only during his presidency, but in the lead up to him winning that presidential campaign. His relation and his very much focus on his audience and staying in connection, staying in contact with them, and creating this message of it's us versus the world. And we've seen this represented greatly throughout these trials, which Donald Trump's been taking his stand in, where he's tried to make this about it being a politically targeted trial. And this was what we talked about in the last time that we talked about this trial and his other trials which are taking place, is his focus on creating a political message around this. So the fact that this is a political attack by the DOJ, by the Department of Justice, by these judges, by Biden, to try and lock him out of political power using the judicial powers, and this is the way he's tried to position himself throughout this period of trials and tribulations. Now, the judge has already concluded that Trump committed fraud through inflating his net worth to secure better loans, But now in his testimony, it will be decided whether Trump will pay upwards of $250 million of fees and or be stripped of his ability to run a business in New York with his adult sons as well. And that's really the key thing here. We're not talking about jail time, which we have been actually talking about in certain other trials which Donald Trump is facing. But, here we're really focusing on his issues around maybe having to pay off these fees or even be stripped of his ability. So not so much jail time, but civil fraud trials bring, their own penalties as well. Now, Trump responded to yes and no questions with an expansive lectures on real estate and loans and finances. So once again, trying to make this about his rhetoric and, kind of almost setting himself up for a political message which he'll bring with his presidential campaign, using the witness stand, to lash out at his adversaries and discredit the process. And this witness stand was really kind of the most looked for and, kind of, I don't know the word for it really, but kind of the most anticipated moment of this testimony and, of this fraud trial was to hear Donald Trump speak at the stand. And so now it's interesting to hear, his responses to these questions. And he did waggle his finger at the judge, saying he called me a fraud and he didn't know anything about me. So once again, trying to make this something about there being biases within, the courtroom rather than it being a fair trial against him. And Trump dismissed the importance of the issues around his financial statements, saying for lenders, they were the most valueless and his brand was far more than stated anyway. So once again, going back to that original argument that we spoke about before, whereby, the Trump team really made it clear that these kind of overvaluations were really irrelevant, because the point is all these banks which did provide loans were supposed to do their own due diligence on whether these claims were true by giving them the loans, and they all gave loans, they were all paid back. So where's really the issue here? And this is why they've tried to make this kind of a kind of political trial rather than it being an actual civil fraud trial. Now Trump is also facing facing three criminal trials, including attempts to overturn the 2020 election and his handling of classified documents after he left office. And he has denied all wrongdoing. There's also another trial around possible hush money paid in a cheating affair with another woman. But that's all to talk about in reference to Donald Trump. This is definitely something to keep your eyes on in relation to New York business in general, but also to understanding the political sphere of the US, as we do now know that Donald Trump is the favourite to win the 2024 presidential election. So definitely keep your eyes on that. But next to talk about shortly is the Rafah crossing. As it pressure does build to open it once again. Now the Rafah boarding crossing between Gaza and Egypt will reopen for evacuations, and this comes following the 2-day closure as a result of an Israeli strike on an ambulance convoy where Hamas terrorists were suspected to be moving through, or at least reported by the IDF. Now this is something we've been talking about a lot recently, is the Rafah crossing and the issues around the border with Israel and Hamas, with the Israeli kind of movements now taking place into Gaza, as the Gaza city does seem to be encircled, and so we've been talking a lot about the possible regional escalations and the effect on wider markets as a result of that, as we've seen with US oil and gold, with gold taking an extraordinary rise following the invasion. And just, the conflict sparking up in general, as well as, the issues which have arisen on the US oil front with, possible levels of, oil prices reaching even $150 a barrel if regional escalation does expand to nations such as Saudi Arabia, we have warned. Now, an unspecified number of Egyptians and foreigners are being allowed to leave with the Red Cross escorting an ambulance convoy from Gaza City to the crossing. And officials in Gaza have now said that the death toll inside has reached 10,000 deaths as bombardments rise within the Strip. As you know, Israel has been bombarding, targets within Gaza since Hamas launched their massacre of 1,400 Israeli civilians on October the 7th. And in response to that, obviously, the IDF has responded with their aerial bombardments, and now they're on the ground military invasion into Gaza. And with that, many civilian casualties have been, seen as a result of collateral damage due to the fact that Hamas does embed their military infrastructure within these residential buildings. There is no real official military infrastructure within Gaza because of the way their military is set up, with Hamas being their political leadership as well as their military, and therefore there's numerous tunnels running underneath all of the kind of city infrastructure, as well as many of the headquarters also being based in these key civilian areas to avoid bombardment by the IDF. As well as it, just being a very densely populated area. And according to diplomats, foreign diplomats, 1,100 foreign nationals have left through the crossing already, with 5,000 still stuck in Gaza. But due to Hamas trying to get its militants out with evacuees, no evacuations took place on the weekend, and concerns are mounting over humanitarian conditions in Gaza as the IDF prepares operations which will push into Gaza City. We've already seen skirmishes taking place and full-on fighting with many armoured movements taking place, and in response Hamas kind of coming out of their tunnels and firing rocket-propelled grenades at these tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, and destroying them with explosives as well, with certain nations calling for a ceasefire. And this is something we've been hearing a lot more recently, as even the most pro-Israel nations do begin to call for at least temporary ceasefires for humanitarian issues. Now, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that he's working to prevent a regional war as a result of this conflict sparking up. And we've seen this with him travelling to meet with the Palestinian authorities, Israel as well, Jordan, and now he's meeting with other officials in Iraq as well, for example. So it is interesting to be seeing, this conflict taking place and the way that the US is responding to it with their kind of foreign diplomats. So definitely keep your eyes on this, as any regional escalations obviously will have great impacts on gold and oil especially. So definitely keep your eyes on that. But next to talk about, of course, is the charts, where we have not too much happening, with US indices beginning to consolidate. Now, yesterday we spoke about how price had pushed last week all the way and up and into this area of resistance and liquidity. And from there, we have now seen a kind of sell-off slightly, and a bit of a consolidation. Now, I did talk about yesterday how, because we'd pushed into this area, it was likely that we were going to see a sort of retracement possibly. And these pushes to the upside were largely driven by certain data releases last week, such as NFP on Friday, which did show that the US economy wasn't doing as well as expected, and therefore more dovish policy by the Fed was expected from the data. So if we're looking to see a possible retracement following the data release, this 38.2% Fibonacci area could be quite interesting to look at, just because it lines up with this significant trend line, which has acted as an area to show bearish movement, and now quite possibly will come down and retest that. So definitely keep your eyes on that area, but not too much happening on US indices apart from us sitting within this area of liquidity, and with the possibility of a move to the downside now coming into vision. But next to talk about is the dollar. The dollar saw great decline last week, in a similar fashion to US indices rising, and this was as a result of more dovish Fed policy being expected. Therefore, we saw that sell-off, and going into yesterday, we saw an actual bullish kind of rise in the dollar, and now we're seemingly on the way up. It'll be interesting to see where we can actually come to though on the dollar. Quite possibly we may only just retest this most previous low, significant low, or even this one up here. But it'll be interesting to see where price can really go as a result of the news which did come out last week in reference to US labor markets, obviously with NFP, and the Fed's interest rate decision and rhetoric which came with that, which was seen by many actually as quite dovish. So definitely keep your eyes on any news to do with the US dollar, as it is in an interesting area at the moment. But next to talk about is Euro USD, which in the opposite fashion of the dollar obviously did see a slight decline, but quite relatively consolidation kind of, sorry, that's poor wording, but we haven't really seen much of the euro going into this week so far, with Monday not presenting too much to say really. We did respond, however, to this trend line, top of a channel that we did note in the weekly market briefing. This was an area that we did note, and it has seemingly responded to that in a bearish fashion, along with this area of liquidity and resistance that we did note as well. Now that we are responding a bit bearish from that area though, it'll be interesting to see how far down we can go really before we might see a move to the upside being continued. So definitely keep your eyes on that area. Note the Fibonacci levels in reference to a possible continuation to the upside, as we are now seemingly forming this bullish channel on Euro USD. Next to talk about though is pound yen, which saw significant bullish rise last week. And now going into this week as well, we have seen a continuation of that bullish momentum, breaking above this Fibonacci extension and kind of taking a bit of a retracement. Now we could be expecting a further retracement still, as a result of this kind of extremely volatile bullish movements that have been taking place. For example, on the the RSI, we have now seen that we've broken above the overbought territory, which often indicates a retracement which is coming. So definitely look out for a retracement which may now come with pound yen, possibly down to the 50% Fibonacci area or 38 as well, to come in contact once again with this bullish trend line. So definitely keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about though is USD JPY, which although yesterday I did kind of comment on the fact that it did look bearish for it simply because it broke below that 78.6% Fibonacci area. It hadn't broken too significantly below it, and from there now it's actually taken quite a bullish move to the upside. Quite possibly this doesn't, this could still mean that we are going to continue a bearish move to the downside. But yeah, definitely keep your eyes on that, as it's in an interesting position with such volatility being encountered by USD JPY recently. So definitely note that. But next to talk about is Bitcoin, where not much is happening, but quite possibly this is the calm before the storm. Obviously in the the weekly market briefing, I did note that we are in a bearish divergence here, and this kind of lack of momentum, lack of liquidity that we are seeing on Bitcoin is signs that we are going to be experiencing a significant sell-off to the downside and retracement. So this is definitely an area to note, as we are failing to break above this 35,000 mark, that I have noted, and this kind of liquidity zone is representing that area. Clearly there is a strong area of resistance, and this lack of ability to break above it could reference a possible move incoming to the downside. So definitely keep your eyes on that. And lastly to talk about though on the charts is gold, which really is just forming a range, and not too much is happening on it. Once again, we're kind of falling back into this area of liquidity that was previously noted, which isn't too relevant, but yes, it's acted as an area of liquidity before. We don't know really what's going to happen with gold here, but we should be really just focusing on any developments in international escalations, especially in relation to the Israel-Palestine conflict. This is really what's driving gold at the moment, and so this is where we should really be looking in reference to what might happen for gold in the future. So any regional escalations, that will be driving gold's price, so definitely keep your eyes on that. But that's all to talk about on the charts, really. Lastly to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, with the first piece of data to talk about being released, it being UK retail sales. That will already be out, along with the Chinese balance of trade and the Aussie interest rate decision. That will all already be out by the time this video goes out, so make sure you've checked that to see what's happening in reference to that as you trade today. As well as that, we do have the Swiss unemployment figure coming out, along with Spanish consumer confidence, and arguably most importantly, we do have Canadian and US balance of trade figures coming out, so that will heavily influence those foreign exchange currency exchange rates. As well as that, we do have numerous Fed official speeches, so that's definitely something to note as well, as their rhetoric will heavily play into how people perceive the Fed's monetary policy. So definitely keep your eyes on all of that. I think we've covered a lot on the articles though, and lots on the charts and lots on the economic calendar. Sorry for being a bit tired today, but hopefully I can make up for it tomorrow. Have a great trading day. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.